Hello, everybody, and welcome back to SHOT Show TV. I'm Larry Keane, Senior Vice President and General Counsel for the National Shooting Sports Foundation. And I'm joined now for a conversation about what's going on in the States with Rob Curtis from Recoil Magazine and Iain Harrison from Recoil Magazine. So let's start with you, Rob. Let's talk about Vermont and what's going on there, what happened last year, unfortunately, and what you think can happen in this coming session.
Well, I don't know how familiar you are with what happened in 2018, but we had S55, which is like, if we could have T-shirts made, like it was horrible because we have a Republican governor up there in Vermont, and he was very, very clear about holding the line for, the rights for firearms, right, for legal firearms owners. And somewhere along the way there in February, we had an issue in the state where we had one of the high schooler or something had threatened to throw down and shoot up a school. So he claims that he was, forced to act and go back on his promise to protect rights and the gun rights.
Yeah, he ran on a platform that he would support the Second Amendment, and the first time there was a little pressure from the gun control community, he knuckled under, unfortunately. But
well, he claims it was an act of conscience, that he couldn't stand to do it. He couldn't stand any inaction. And what's troubling, though, is that as soon as he made that statement, there was literally the next morning, a handful of bills for gun control that were brought to the State House.
Right. Well, he opened up the door, and the gun control community, stepped right through and jammed him up with bills that, which some of them he signed into law, unfortunately. So.
And the sad thing is, Vermont was actually one of the states in the nation that had really, really great gun laws for us. I think that we were left to take care of ourselves.
And very low crime.
And it still does have one of the lowest crime rates in the country. So, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of ways you could look at this and say that gun control, isn't going to do us any good in the state of Vermont. And
so, what do you think can be done now, this coming session, to try to retake some ground, repeal some of these onerous provisions like magazine capacity and age limits and things like that?
So yeah, we're left with magazine capacity issues, age limits on firearms purchases, and we now have red flag laws. And honestly, I don't know what we can do to get back to where we needed to be. But what we need to do is to come together in the state and look at the makeup of the state and look to our political parties and see what we can get from support.
It shows the importance of always being engaged, and I think a lot of people assumed this will never happen in Vermont. It's Vermont. 100%. We have very lax gun laws. There's no crime. And I think people just got complacent. And that's, I think, a lesson for everybody not to get complacent, because when you do and you take things for granted, you get bad outcomes like we saw in Vermont, which again is not going to make Vermont a safer place to be. It's already very safe. It's just going to interfere on the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens in the state. So let's talk about in some of the other states and what's going on this year.
Well, to speak to your point there, Larry, I think unfortunately gun control laws act as a ratchet. They only work one way. And once you lose those rights, you are not going to get them back without a long and hard road ahead of you. So it's one of the things that we need to push back on. Now, for example, in Oregon right now, there's a crazy bill being tabled that not only restricts people's Second Amendment rights to 10-round magazines, now it's 5-round limit. It's like, okay, when are you going to stop?
And isn't one of the bills or provisions in the bill would limit the number of bullets you can purchase in a month to 20?
Exactly. Where do these people get this information from?
I have no idea.
Seriously, I used to live in Oregon, and despite the fact it is a crunchy granola state, with a lot of reasons to be in a crunchy granola state. I mean, it's a beautiful part of the world, and I know a lot of people who use that sort of lifestyle, but they're very much dedicated Second Amendment advocates. So it kind of makes me wonder what has happened in the last few years in order to change that landscape. I don't think this is a grassroots movement. I think it's funded very well out of New York City,
Yeah, by a certain former mayor.
Exactly. And I think he's managed to buy himself an AstroTurf movement and get in the ear of a number of politicians who, for whatever reason, are listening to him.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I mean, we see he's actually spent $26 million or so in the last 2 years here in Nevada to press for gun control measures.
Yeah, Nevada's a great illustration of that, and it's more of an illustration of what happens when laws are proposed and written by people who don't know a damn thing about the subject.
Right.
And so what happened to the background check provision in Nevada's recent law?
So one of the things you mentioned is, and we saw it in Vermont, and we've seen bills introduced elsewhere, Oregon included, and Florida passed it, is to restrict the age to purchase long guns. For people who are 18, 19, and 20. I mean, you could be married, have a child, be in the military, be overseas, have served your country overseas, and you can't buy, a long gun to go turkey hunting or to shoot sporting clays. And then coupled with the Gun Control Act that limits purchasing of handguns to people who are 21, you've effectively disenfranchised the Second Amendment rights of young adults, 18, 19, and 20. They can't buy any firearms. I mean, it just seems to me to be so obviously unconstitutional. Even the age 21 restriction, I mean, at 18 in America, you're the age of majority, you're a full adult, and you have legal, constitutional rights. No one would suggest that you could come in and restrict the ability of somebody to, what book they can buy based on their age once they're 18.
Well, I think anybody who proposes that, and particularly the people who maybe came out of Florida after the Parkland shooting and had been manipulated by the media and the gun control movement to do that, I think maybe we should ask them. So if you're willing to give up your Second Amendment rights until the age of 21, okay, how about the right to vote?
Right. Or the right to get married, or, to read books, your other constitutional rights, exactly right. And of course, the answer is going to be, we're not going to give up anything, right? So it's, they just don't care. The people who want to take those rights away don't care about the Second Amendment, and they don't care that they're infringing upon the rights of others. It's terrible. So what do you see in any other states that represent a particular challenge that folks need to be paying attention to?
Well, I think not only at the state level, we also need to be careful on the local level as well, because states that don't have preemption or perhaps have preemption laws which are not enforced. For example, Boulder, Colorado, and that's a prime example.
Right, yeah.
Well, we're looking in Vermont right now. Some of the issues that we're going to be facing right now are safe storage bills. We're looking at waiting periods of being enacted. We're looking at gun registration. The thing that scares me the most is actually the state is trying to figure out what they're going to do, how they can define what an assault rifle is. We start seeing bills coming up that way, which really concerns me.
We've seen quite a number of storage laws, mandating that you have to have a firearm stored, which, to me, I think the Supreme Court in Heller addressed that issue and said DC's mandatory storage law that required the firearm to be locked was unconstitutional under the Second Amendment. So I don't really understand how these states can read Heller and then say, well, we're going to do what Heller said you can't.
I don't understand how they're going to. I think they're going to enforce half of these laws.
Well, it's impossible, right? I mean, how are they going to know? Are the police going to come to your house and check?
Yeah, house by house inspections.
Yeah. Well, we see, for example, in New Jersey, they courts upheld the restriction on magazine capacity. You're supposed to turn in the magazines, destroy them, or get them out of the state.
Yeah, all those magazines.
And the state police said, we're not going door to door. And how many magazines have been turned in to the New Jersey State Police since January 1st?
Yeah, you can probably.
I think they're all right here.
Yeah.
We have them right here for you.
The answer's none.
Count them on the fingers of a boxing glove.
Right. So, I mean, it's a little bit like Connecticut when they passed the restriction on magazine capacity. You were, if you had larger magazines, they were grandfathered, but you had to register them, and it became laughable. People would just walk in and say, "I have 500," because they're not serialized. There's no way to know. There's no way to enforce it. And I heard stories about people walking in and that the people at the state police in Connecticut would chuckle and laugh because they knew how absurd it was.
I think it comes down to the fact that we have this need to do something. We feel the need to do something, and the cheapest thing that we can do is ban something because it doesn't involve paying for security. It doesn't involve education. It doesn't involve interfacing with your community. It just involves putting a law down, saying these are now banned.
Well, that's why it's important that, look, no one wants to see criminals or crazy people or children finding, an unsecured loaded firearm in a home. But we have to work on real solutions that will address these issues, not these knee-jerk, feel-good, ban a product and not address the real problem.
Yeah.
And that's why, NSSF has all these programs that we do, like Child Safe and Don't Lie for the Other Guy and Operation Secure Store, and Fix SNCCs, to try to have real solutions that are effective, that help solve the problem, not banning products that law-abiding citizens own and that don't cause a problem.
Exactly, but the NSSF programs they're grassroots programs. They are not mandated top-down by the government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I guess.
One closing comment.
Well, I think that at some point, I don't think people that argue so strenuously for gun control issues understand at a local level how much oxygen they remove from the conversation when the legislators can't make a meaningful, they can't pass meaningful legislation when they're trying to deal with these, pissant issues. So it's difficult.
It's easier just to pass meaningless legislation than really tackle the problem.
Yeah.
Thanks very much for joining me here for this great conversation. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time on SHOT Show TV.